All right. If you missed the day in class where we went over our abstract wire sculpture presentation, all you need to do is go to our project resources channel, click Files, go to Abstract Wire Sculpture, and click on the Abstract Wire Sculpture PowerPoint. This is where you can find everything we talked about in class. So, our next project is just going to be a mini 2-week project, abstract perspective wire sculptures. So basically, when we dive into what that means exactly, abstract or non-representational just means pieces of art that don't attempt to represent or reference reality. So we're not trying to recreate an object that exists or make it look like anything specific, unless later in your design that's something you do want to do. But we're just making abstract sculptures that show different perspectives as you look around the entire sculpture. With this project, we're going to practice struggling with our materials. Since this is a little mini warm-up project for the semester, our first project using physical supplies, nylon, or like the disposable, shoe store socks that we're going to use, likes to contract and shrink, while wire likes to hold its shape, so they contradict. You are going to struggle with the competing materials to reform and create the shape that you want for your sculpture. As you do this, you're going to experiment with bending the wire, making sure it's interesting from all sides, having wire form shapes from all directions, because we're talking about perspective here. And as you go through this presentation, there are some YouTube links if you want to watch other people create this project, but after this presentation, I will also show a demonstration. So the required supplies you must use are 4 things, all located in your supply bag: your foam block, your wire, your piece of nylon, and your bottle of craft glue. Those are the standard 4 things every single person is going to use. So if we break this down step by step, you're just going to cut a piece of wire out of the wire you got, maybe no longer than 18 inches or so, depending on what you want to do. If you want to use more than one piece of wire to create a unique shape, that's totally fine as well. This is just the standard example. So you're going to insert both ends into the foam block, cover and stretch the nylon over the foam block, and again, I will show you exactly how to do it in the demonstration towards the second half of this video. It will bend and crush the wire, that is perfectly fine. Then, once you reshape your project into the desired abstract form that you like, you're going to completely cover it in 1 to 2 layers of your glue. And again, you're going to use the provided glue bottle from your supply bag. Once the glue is fully dried, so this is going to, take 1 or 2 days after you begin the glue, then you can start decorating your sculpture with different materials. I didn't have enough resources to send everybody with different decoration materials, so I made a couple slides to give you some ideas of what you could do. So you could use something like markers and ink. Crayons, colored pencils won't really show up on the nylon covered in dried glue. You need something more strong than that. So you do have a supply bag marker if you want to do some black and white designs. Regular old Crayola standard markers from the dollar store anywhere will work out. Pens will work if it has like a thick, strong ink, and any other sort of, permanent regular marker that uses ink as well. The preferred method, if you have access to it, is using acrylic or watercolor. Acrylic paints are a great option. Watercolors will also work, though the colors might not be as strong, and it depends on what kind of look you're going for. The best option, I think, for this project, if you want small details, would be acrylic paint markers. They're not regular markers, they're markers filled with paint, though you use them as regular markers. This will give you probably the best results. You can find them for like $5 at Five Below. I have a set that I'll be using for my own example. But it just depends on what you can find available to you. Another thing, you can use papers and fabrics. You can print out images, cut them out and paste them on. You can use magazine cutouts, make collage on the surface of your project. felt or other fabrics, even stickers, just depending on the type of sticker you want to use. Maybe run it by me first, depending on what kind of look you want for your project. You can also use miscellaneous crafting supplies that you can glue on, so, you know, glitter glue pens, fabric paint pens, adhesive rhinestones, pipe cleaners, yarn or string, which I might use for mine if I want some texture, buttons, really anything that is like glue on-able to a surface, I guess. In this slide is a bunch of examples. You can also Google, you know, nylon wire sculptures if you want to see more up close. Feel free to click onto this presentation on Teams and zoom in on these different photos. But here's a slide just with a bunch of examples you could follow or get inspiration from, or you can make a project that doesn't resemble anything you find online. It is very open-ended and the design is completely up to you. So for your grading criteria, and I recommend you sort of, you know, screenshot or save this image or refer back to it on Teams, but you need to create your sculpture base with the materials, the required 4 materials. You need to use additional supplies to add substantial design and decoration. You need to work during class time. Use your class time wisely to get those participation points. And lastly, you need to turn in photos of your sculpture and answer the reflection questions for it on the assignments tab in Teams, as usual with every project. So those are the 4 things to consider while doing your project. Maybe use it as a checklist. All right, coming up, I'm just going to show you a quick demo on how to create this sculpture. All right. I lost the audio to my demonstration, so I'm just going to do a little voiceover as it goes on. So basically, you're going to need the 4 required supplies as listed in the demo and in the presentation: the glue, the nylon, the foam block, the wire. This is just the required 4 supplies everyone has to use. So for our wire, if it's in that little loop you were given in your supply bag or in the spool, you're going to have to cut a piece of it with a pair of scissors. I recommend approximately 18 inches. It could be more or less depending on what kind of look you're going for with your sculpture form, okay? So in this video, I'm just using my scissors. Regular scissors will do just fine to cut a piece of wire. The mini, like kid scissors, might not work. You're gonna need maybe kitchen scissors or the larger regular pair. So over here, I'm just talking about the different lengths of wire you can use. And then the next step would be to sort of bend the wire in half. So the 2 ends are on one side and there's a loop on the other. And you're gonna stick the ends into your foam block. So when you do that, you can choose to do it side by side or diagonally. Over here, I'm just showing you what side by side would be, just on either end. But I prefer diagonally because it gives you a bigger space to work with, which just means in the opposite corners. So I'm going to put the ends of the wire into the foam block. I am inserting almost the entire way, but not so that it pokes out from the bottom. You just want to put your wire in far enough where if you lift and shake the block, it's not going to fall out. But still notice how there is nothing poking out of the bottom. After this step, you are going to have your foam block with your wire loop sticking out. And then the next step would be to set that aside and get your nylon ready to stretch over it. Before you do that, you might want to take a couple minutes to stretch out your nylon with your hands. That's going to make it a lot more easy when you stretch it over your wire and your block. So I'm just using my hands to stretch it out. I'm not going to do it for the full couple minutes for the sake of the video, but you can, you know, up and down stretch out the nylon. You can put your hand in it. Just make sure that it's not like the new prepackaged small piece. The more you take the time to stretch it out, the easier it's going to be. So after a while, you should notice that it looks like a lot larger. And then you're going to use this nylon to stretch over your wire loop and your block, which I will show you right now. I'm just taking the opening of that and stretching it over. Notice it is going to bend the wire, shrink it. That is totally fine. It's supposed to do that. as we talked about, struggling with materials. You also want to stretch it over the block. That is something a lot of students forget. You need to stretch it not only over the wire, but the block base as well. And you'll know that you stretched it over your sculpture far enough when the ends of the nylon form this like weird ring circle thing on the bottom of your foam block base. So you'll get that like weird circle thing. That's how you know that you stretched it far enough over your project. And you're just going to leave it be for now. The next step would be to finally stretch out your project in whatever form you'd like. Coming up next in this demonstration, you're just going to see me, play around with the shape. Really, it could take any form you'd like. Maybe consider what shape you're going to do if you already know how you're going to decorate it. For the sake of this video, I'm just going to keep it simple, just so I don't, take up too much time showing you how you can form it. But you could form it forwards and backwards, you could stretch it in and out, you can do different twists. Really, it is entirely up to you on how you want to sculpt your wire and your nylon. So again, I'm just taking some time experimenting with the different things that I can do. Again, if you choose to put in a second piece of wire to create some funkier forms, that's totally up to you if you'd like to do that. So just going through, reshaping it. Once you reach something that you like, soon I'll talk about what the next step would be. And it seems towards the end of this video, I finally decided the form that I would like to keep for the video. Alright, I'm just going to skip ahead a little bit for you. Alright, and that's what I decided on. The next step would be to cover it in 1 to 2 layers of glue. This is so that you can actually put stuff on the surface to decorate it, because the nylon isn't really going to take markers, colors, or paints well without a coat. So I'm going to take the glue. You could try and use a brush or a sponge. I honestly just found it easier to use your hands and your fingers. That's the fastest way, because the brush and the sponge absorb the glue too much, and it makes it a lot more difficult to spread. And honestly, it's going to be a lot easier if you just open up the glue cap entirely. I kind of struggle with it, but in the next clip, I'll show you the next step. Okay, so once you have your form decided and ready, you're just going to take the cap completely off of your glue bottle. It'll be a lot easier that way. And then what I like to do is to just, squeeze out. You might use up your entire bottle, but you're just going to squeeze out your glue and just put it randomly on an area of your sculpture. I would just go area by area, and honestly just take your hand and spread it around. Notice how it's like moving because it's nylon, it's a fabric, and you might struggle with spreading the glue around, but eventually it'll dry and create a hard surface. And if you run out of glue in your glue bottle, any white glue or any glue that dries clear will work. So even like Elmer's glue or some cheap glue that you have at home or from the dollar store will work as well. And you're just going to cover the entire surface of your project, including the block part, with your glue. So even if you cover your nylon and wire part, you need to make sure to also spread the glue over the block part of your project and cover its entire surface. The reason it's important not to do this, the day it is due or the day before it's due, the glue needs time to dry. It might take an entire day or two for each layer to dry, and we want to do 1 to 2 layers depending. So after you cover the entire surface in glue, your hands might be a little messy, but it'll wash off, or you can wait for it to dry and just rub it off your hands. But once the entire thing is covered in glue and dries, and you do 1 to 2 layers depending on what you need, it should turn out something like this. If you hear it, now the nylon is not a soft fabric anymore. It is a hard surface that you can apply decorations, paint, marker, glue on things. it's now a smoother, less absorbent surface. So once you cover your entire project in 1 to 2 layers of glue and it has fully dried, you should just have a blank canvas to decorate your sculpture in any way that you would like. It does need to be fully decorated. I don't want any blank spaces on it. That is the main requirement, but feel free to review the requirements in the PowerPoint on our Teams page. Once you finish decorating your sculpture, which I have not done yet, you're going to take a photo of it from the front and back, or as many angles as you can, and turn it in on our Teams page under the Assignments tab with the reflection questions answered. And that is the basics of how to complete and turn in your sculpture. If you have any questions after watching this video, please ask me on Teams.